Hey everybody, it's Mom of Two, Wife of One, and thank you so much for coming to my channel or coming back to my channel if you've been here before. If you're new here, hi, welcome. Thank you so much for clicking on the link. Obviously, you clicked on it because you were interested, either Married at First Sight or you thought I looked interesting. Either way, thank you guys so much for coming here. For those who have been here before, thank you guys so much for always commenting on my videos, liking the videos, sharing the videos in some cases. And I just love the community that we've built here. I love the conversations that we have around this sometimes raggedy show. So without further ado, first of all, I do want to apologize because this video is a day late. I apologize for that, but I'm here now. Let's discuss what for me was probably one of the more boring episodes of Married at First Sight, even though it had something that I like that they do every season. I love that every season they take a trip down memory lane. Because obviously, outside of this unconventional way of getting married, when you're dating someone that you eventually marry, obviously conversations come up about your childhood, how you were raised, your past relationships. You talk about your parents and maybe their marriage or non-marriage and how that influenced you and your relationships and how it influences how you see yourself and all that stuff. But obviously these couples don't get to do that because they meet at the altar. So I love that they had this episode where they write letters to their younger selves and then they take their spouse either to the home where they grew up or something that represents their childhood. And I really love how creative everyone got with that because a lot of them were not necessarily born in Nashville. So I liked where people took things. I thought it was interesting. I really enjoyed that. So, as you know, we are here to discuss Married at First Sight, Season 16, Episode 13, which was called I'm Not Acting Crazy With You Tonight. Now, again, I'll say that I thought that this episode was pretty boring. I thought we learned some good information from people, but I honestly didn't have a lot of notes for a lot of people. Like the way I do my notes is that I normally summarize what's been said, summarize what I see, and then I'll add my own commentary in the notes. And I legit didn't have a lot of commentary this time, which was interesting. And again, I think it's indicative of the fact that I thought this episode was kind of slow. But I want to start with Gina and Clint. I will say that every episode, and I've been saying this for a few weeks, I love that every episode they're learning more about each other. Their respect for each other is growing. Their actual like for each other is really growing. And every episode, they're clearly seeing more and more how the person that they've been matched with is the perfect match for them. Like, oh, I was asking for a man who does this and Clinton does it. And oh, I'm looking for a woman who's ambitious and who's this. And Gina does that too. And so I really like that they're learning more and more about each other. And it's so great. He took her to a soccer field because he used to play soccer when he was young. And he talked about the lessons that he's learned as a soccer player. She took him to the beauty school. I don't know if it's the exact beauty school that she went to or the hair school, but she talked about how she kind of pivoted in her career from broadcasting to doing hair and how it was the best decision she's ever made. And he's like, oh, I pivoted too from being a pilot to being in tech. Like we have so much in common. Yes, you do. And that's great. And I think, again, they're a good, solid couple. And I love that they're figuring out why they're a solid couple. However, we are now at the 5-week mark of this experiment. They have 3 weeks, less than 3 weeks now, of marriage before they have to decide if they want to stay married or get a divorce. So you can like him all you want. You can respect her all you want. But the main issue you guys had was that we're not attracted to each other. There's no chemistry here, blah, blah, blah. I haven't heard them mention that at all since they got back from the honeymoon. So things are looking great for them in terms of everything else. Every other part of the relationship is looking good and it's looking strong. And I know they want to build that stuff up and focus on everything else later. But at some point, you have to kind of address the elephant in the room, and they have not. There is no kissing. There's no hand holding. There is like hugging a little bit, but that's all we're getting. And I don't know if behind closed doors, when the cameras are on, we're getting more, but it doesn't seem like we are. They're still sleeping in separate bedrooms as far as I can tell, even though she goes in his bedroom sometimes, but that's because her dog is in there. It's not like she going in there just to say, hey. So I don't know how much progress they're actually making. And that worries me a little bit. And I've said this before, at the end of this experiment, for them, I see them becoming really good friends and learning a lot more about themselves than they did before they started this experiment. Like, oh, Gina helped me realize that sometimes I need to think before I speak. Clint helped me realize that, you know what, I need to balance my work with my play. That was great, Clint. That was great, Gina. Okay, thank you for the life lesson. I hope you have a wonderful life. I don't see this ending in them staying married to each other unless they add in that element of sensuality, of sexuality, of any kind of intimacy, because they're having emotional intimacy, which is very important. Don't get me wrong. but there's no other kind of intimacy that's been introduced. I really need them to pick up the pace when we got less than 3 weeks. Like, what are we doing here? Are either of you even interested in this? Have either of your ideas changed about being attracted to each other? Again, that conversation has not been had. Even when they're having their individual conversations with other couples or their friends or their family, it still isn't coming up. So we legitimately don't know how either of them feel about each other from the physical standpoint. We have no idea. We don't know if this changed or not. So I don't have great hopes for that. And it's just kind of frustrating to watch because, again, you guys are doing great, but every week I'm saying the same thing. They're doing great. They're so healthy and blah, blah, blah. But there's nothing else happening, guys. Like, I need y'all to do something. So that was pretty much them. They visited the stuff, and she had some of her salon girls come to the house for dinner, and he got to talk to them. And it's like, okay. I don't think he really learned anything new, but it was like, okay, that was cute. But still, like, there's nothing else there. There's really nothing else there. It's just kind of bothersome. We'll go to Nicole and Chris now. So neither of them were born in Nashville, but she's an Italian, from a heavy Italian family, and something that's very big in Italian culture is food. So she took them to this like Italian shop where they ate, and she talked about her childhood and how she was rebellious and she, just craved attention all the time. And when she was in high school, she lied, she cut school, she did all this stuff. And Chris made the comment, if Nicole was like that, the old version of Nicole was still in her, then I wouldn't be attracted to that. I was like, okay, duh, obviously nobody would. But she also specified and said this is how I was in high school. She's grown, she's 32. But it was still like, oh, okay, this is great. Learn more about you. That's wonderful. And she said that she wanted to be honest with Chris so that he had a full idea of who she is and he could make the best decision on decision day. But that's not who she is. That's who she was. And I think words are very important and the meaning of words are very important. So be very clear, Nicole, with what you're saying. You're not saying I need him to know who I am. You're saying I want him to know what I used to be and the journey that it took for me to get to this point so that he can understand the full picture of who Nicole was and is. And I think that's fair and that makes sense and that's fine. He took her to a paint store because his dad owned a paint shop or owned a painting company rather, and he had to work for him. And he told about how he didn't have the best relationship with his father. He wasn't someone that he could aspire to be. He wasn't a great role model, but through them getting older and through even him getting married, that he met Nicole and he sent Chris this text about how much he likes her. He's like, I feel like every step, we're getting closer with every new life change, basically. And it was good to kind of hear that from him because a lot of the information we've heard from him is about how in relationships he was a pushover and women didn't respect him or didn't show him the intimacy that he needed or he didn't feel worthy of love or whatever. So it was nice to hear about his struggles as a child and about his relationship with his father, something a little new. So I appreciated that. And again, that was pretty much it. Like they did that and it was great and they painted a little canvas. One thing I did like, they had a moment where they're in their house and they're painting this canvas. And of course it's looking terrible because neither of them are artists, but they're just having a good time. But what I liked is that she opened space in that moment for him to use his accents. You guys may not remember, but in the very beginning of this season, like right before they got married, we're learning about the individuals. And Chris talked about how he loves doing accents. It's like his thing. It makes him happy. He thinks it's funny. But we hadn't really seen him do that with Nicole, at least not on camera. We hadn't seen him really pull out that party trick. And I think he's probably a little self-conscious about it because obviously he thinks it's funny. He may not think other people find it funny, especially a wife that he's never met before. So I love that in that moment of painting the canvas, she opened the space for him to do that. So he was making the impression of like an old man, of someone who was like from a different country or something. And obviously, I ain't find it funny, but I love that she provided that space for him, that he could legitimately be himself. And while he's doing the accent, she is sitting there with this fake mustache on because she's really goofy too. And it was, again, very indicative of the fact that, okay, we are just ourselves. We are that comfortable with each other. And this is a really good place to be in. That I don't have to feel like I'm being too goofy. I don't have to feel like you're judging me for my accents. Both of us have provided this space where we can legitimately just be ourselves. And because neither of them really had that in a relationship before, they're both, I think, a little, I don't say hesitant to believe that it's true. I feel like Chris is a little more comfortable with how everything is going than Nicole is. I think Nicole in the back of her mind, and she said, I'm always going to kind of question, is this real? Is this going to end? Because I have been so traumatized by my past relationships. And I've said this before, she needs deep therapy. And I'm assuming she's gone to some kind of therapy. I'm assuming because she can talk about what happened in her past without crying, without having an actual physical reaction. Excuse me. So that gives me the impression that she's dealt with it on some level. But the fact that emotionally you're still kind of dealing with it, and emotionally you're bringing all that baggage into this current relationship, shows me that either you need to go back to therapy, or what they told you in therapy didn't really hit, or you didn't really take everything that you needed to take from it. But at the end of the day, they're still good. They're still happy. They still, haven't said the L word, but it's clear that they love each other. Yay, great for them. Jasmine and Eris. Now, so the biggest issue with them, obviously, well, actually, I think it's more than one issue. Eris is in a place where he wants to open up and be vulnerable with Jasmine. My issue with that is she's been asking for that for the past 5 weeks. So now all of a sudden, I just want to open up and tell her everything. And I want her to be open to tell me stuff. And I read in some comments yesterday, or not yesterday, 2 days ago, that it's really rich that now he wants her to open up. But now, after she's been asking for 5 weeks, I don't blame, and I kind of agree, I don't blame her for not being gung-ho about opening up right away. If you've been asking for something from somebody for all this time, letting them know how important it is for you to have emotional intimacy, letting that person know how important it is to have these tough conversations, and they have rebuffed you at every turn, not to mention they're still blatantly telling you all the time they're not attracted to you, your guard is going up. Whether it was up before or not is irrelevant, but now it's like steel, it is like metal, it's every hard every hard material you can think of, because nothing is penetrating through this wall, because you're not giving me what I need, and you're telling me you basically don't think I'm cute. Like, what else am I supposed to do with this? So now he's opening up, which is good, and I love the fact that he is comfortable doing, he doesn't seem awkward about it. He seems very comfortable talking to her about a lot of stuff, which is good on one hand, but the other hand, it may be too little too late for her. I think we saw a little bit of her kind of chipping away and admitting some things, because before she was kind of letting him lead the conversation, wasn't really opening up about stuff, but we got to see more of her being a little vulnerable with him. So I guess she's like, okay, I see he's making an effort. I guess I'll tell him like a little something. So when they had their trip down memory lane, he took her to a card shop, because he used to collect cards when he was young. And he talked about collecting the cards and how he moved around a lot. And even when they moved, sometimes he would forget clothes, shoes, hats, whatever, but he never got his card collection. And I think for him, it gave him kind of a sense of stability. It was a great, conversation started when he met other young kids, like, oh, you collect cards, so do I, and let's be friends, and blah, blah, blah. So it was nice. I thought it was cool. But one thing he did talk about that obviously freaked her out a little bit. He said that because he moved around so much, it helped him adapt to new environments, but also made it easy for him to move on, not just physically, but even in relationships. It was like, okay, this ain't working for me. Well, I'm going to leave, because I'm used to leaving anyway. So it's easy for me to just leave a situation that I'm not comfortable with and do something else. So she's like, well, that don't make me feel good that it's so easy for him to move on. And it's like, granted, I feel like almost everything can have a positive and a negative connotation. Being adaptable is not a bad thing. It does mean that you're able to find comfort in every situation. You're able to find joy almost in every situation. So the idea of him being easily adaptable to new circumstances, situations, environments, relationships, that is not a bad thing by itself. But I do understand her concern of it being so easy for him to move on. But I think, again, that's one of the reasons why he signed up for this experiment, because it's not so easy to move on from an actual marriage as it is from just dating somebody. So I think he forced himself to do this because he was tired of running, and he was tired of moving on so easily without seeing if something of substance was there. So I think she needs to kind of think about that, as opposed to focusing just on that one little thing, because I understand it being alarming, but it's like, but he's here, and he signed up to be married to you. He didn't sign up for a dating show. He didn't sign up for a blind date. He signed up to actually be married. So that's a sign, at least I hope, that he is trying to get out of that mode of walking away when things feel uncomfortable for him. That is the hope, obviously. And in his letter that he wrote to his younger self, he talked about he wrote it from the perspective of when he was living in Newport News, Virginia, when he was 12, and how he felt so lonely. And he talked about telling his younger self, forgive your father and cherish all those memories you have with him, and encouraging his younger self to, that it's safe to talk about your feelings, and it's one of the most courageous things you can do. And I was like, oh, it's a really sweet letter. And he also had this letter that he kept that his father wrote his mother. He's like, I don't know exactly, where they were in their relationship at the time, but it was like 1989. And he was like, I keep this letter with me, like whenever I'm going through a bad patch or whenever I feel sad. Like sometimes I may go to the drive past the playground and I see a father and a son together, or a father and his kids. Then I may read the letter, just kind of feel closer to my dad. And I was like, that's really sweet. It was a very sweet, tender moment. And I loved that he, again, it's all about creating these spaces. Because you can ask for your partner to be vulnerable all day long. Tell me more about yourself. Tell me how you feel about this. Tell me how you feel about that. But if you don't provide an environment where they're comfortable talking about these things, then there's no point in you asking for it. Because it's not easy for any man or woman, whoever, to really sit down and talk about the nitty gritty. I can sit here and tell you now, hey, I'm sad today because this happened. But there's always some underlying stuff under there. Well, why did that particular thing make you sad? How do you express your sadness? Has the way you express your sadness changed from your age now to how you were years ago? Do you think the way you handle it now is better or worse? There's a lot of underlying things behind every statement we make, but it's not always easy to talk to someone about it. A, because that person may not feel comfortable enough to us. We may feel like we're going to get judged. But also, B, sometimes you're just not ready to face yourself and face what you feel. So I love that Eris is in a place where he can talk to Jasmine about exactly how he feels, and he's able to be vulnerable and open and honest. And I like that they had that moment. And Jasmine, did she take him anywhere? She didn't take him anywhere. I was thinking about that. She didn't take him to any place, but she did read her letter to her younger self, and she talked about when she was 9, they moved to Memphis, Tennessee, and she was bullied for being too proper. And I definitely felt her on that. I wasn't necessarily bullied, but my mother, who's always been very big on education, was very big on making sure we spoke proper English. And we didn't necessarily move around a lot at all. The house that my parents live in now, we moved there when I was 9, and I was there up until pretty much I got with my husband. So I was there like my whole childhood, adult life, whatever. But I got teased all the time about speaking proper. And, we didn't really speak slang that much. Like my mother that's not how we were raised. It wasn't really spoken in our house like that. We always spoke very proper English. So I did get teased a lot for quote unquote talking like a white girl, because apparently only white girls speak proper English. That was my personal story. And so I understood what Jasmine meant by just being bullied for speaking proper, probably for also carrying herself a certain way. And, obviously kids, are going to mock whatever they don't understand or mock whatever is different for them. That's just how kids are. But that does leave a lasting impact on you. And you don't really know how much of an impact it is until you get certain situations as an adult. And you're like, wow, that all came from me doing this. No wonder it's not comfortable for me to do this or to do that. So she talks about that in her letter. And I love how, again, this was her time to be vulnerable. I appreciated that. And it was a nice moment. And then also they went on a double date with Shaquille and Kirsten, who we'll talk about last. And the double date looked really fun. It was like an obstacle course, but instead, and I thought it was paintballing at first, but instead of paintballing, it was like these plastic, like bow and arrows. And I was like, oh, that's kind of different. It looked fun. It was just the 4 of them in the space. It looked really cute or whatever. And then at the end of the date, Eris went and talked to Kirsten, and Shaq talked to Jasmine, which I always, and I've said this before in past videos, I love on this show whenever, we always have like the girls together and the guys together, but I love when they mix it up and you have the girls and the guys together, but mixed couples and vice versa on this other side. I love that because you're able to get a different perspective from the opposite sex, from someone who was not your husband. And I always like when they've done that. So I like that they did this time too. I felt like Kirsten and Eris, there wasn't really a lot of conversation that happened, like nothing important really took place. With Jasmine and Shaquille, Shaquille assured her, you're a beautiful woman inside and out. I'm glad that he's starting to open up, but you need to make sure you understand your worth and make sure you demand what it is that you want from this marriage. And Shaquille is definitely like that voice of reason and that voice of really good advice. And I think that stems from him being a mentor, that he just kind of falls into that role very easily of being the supporter and the encourager and kind of pushing you to get what you feel like you deserve. But in terms of just Jasmine and Eris, that's pretty much all that happened. Kirsten and Shaquille, there's a lot to unpack here, I think. I will say this. This is an epiphany I got, and I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong down below. It's fine. I feel like not all women, but I think some women, when they get into a relationship, they fall into one or two categories. You either, and I guess technically this stems from heterosexual relationships. You either want a man who is exactly like your daddy because your daddy was so amazing, blah, blah, blah. Or you are depending on this man to give you what your father never gave you. And obviously, a lot of what we want or expect out of a relationship does come from what we saw growing up. And for some of us, that was a relationship between our mother and our father. That's all we knew. That was our blueprint. So we watched that and we either decided this is what I want, or no, this is wrong. I make sure my next relationship, my husband don't treat me that way. I want something different. And so I understand that. But for Kirsten, my question for you is, because I know she watches me. Hey, Kirsten, nice to meet you. How can you expect Shaquille to act like your father, to embody the characteristics of your father, if you won't even let Shaquille meet him? That doesn't make any sense to me. To hold me to the standard of a man that you won't even let me meet, how am I supposed to do that? Because you're getting, and people, we don't understand this sometimes. As a daughter, because I fall into this trap too. As a daughter, I know how my father is as my daddy. I know how my daddy is. As an adult daughter now, I'm able to see how my daddy is as a husband. He was a husband my entire life. Always been a husband. My parents have been married now for almost 41 years, right? He has always been a husband. However, I never saw him in that role as a husband. That didn't dawn on me when I was younger to see how he was as a husband to my mother. I saw him as my daddy. That was it. But now getting older now, it's like, oh, okay. I see now as a husband that you're doing this, you're saying this or whatever. And some things I'm not really cool with. Some things I am. But at the end of the day, I'm also not the one married to him. So whether I'm cool with some of the stuff he does or not, that ain't got nothing to do with me, right? But I feel like for Kirsten, again, she's basing what she thinks her father did as a husband, and she's saying she can't want you to do those things. But she's not the best judge of character when it comes to that, because you were not married to this man. And your view is definitely going to be a lot, I don't know if it's that's the term, rose-colored glasses, because you're looking at it from the perspective of a daughter and like, oh, my daddy did this, he provided this, he did this, da 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 da. But it's like, you're only getting part of the picture and part of the story. So it isn't fair to ask your spouse to adhere to this ideal in your head with A, without knowing the whole story, and B, without allowing Shaquille to meet him. So that's a mistake. Kirsten, again, I know you're watching, so I hope you take that under advisement. I know you're being extra protective about your family. You don't necessarily want him to meet all of them because you don't know if this is real or true or not. On one hand, I guess I can kind of get that, but on the other hand, especially because he keeps reiterating to her, family is so important to him, like really important to him. So even when she took him to see a house that she grew up in, he took her to dinner because his family lives like a few hours away. He took her to dinner where his godmother and his godsister were to talk about how Shaquille is and as a member of the family, the role that he plays. He's a person that's very intent on keeping everybody together, checking in with everybody, making sure we get together for Thanksgiving, for Christmas. Let's make sure we go to this graduation of this little cousin. Like, he is that person in the family, right? And, again, he set that up because he wants to make sure Kirsten understands family is so incredibly important to me, but not just my family. The idea of family is very important to me. So the fact that you won't let me meet yours, that bothers me. I don't think he's physically said that bothers me. He said it to Jasmine because Jasmine was pressing him like, that don't bother you? Are you sure that don't bother you? And he's like, yeah, it does bother me. And I'm like, we all do it bother you. I don't know why he didn't say it the first time. But again, I don't know if he's told Kirsten that. She's made it clear why she doesn't want him to meet the family, whatever. But if you know this is really important to him, and you know how much he holds that in high value, I mean, you got to budge a little bit. There has to be some kind of compromise there. I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, it ain't happening yet. So I will say that. For her, this episode starts, because she's a realtor. It starts with her taking him to a house that she has on the market. And, you know, he was like, it's really sexy seeing her in her element. And she's, you know, talking about this and talking about that. She's talking about, oh, look at this gorgeous kitchen and look at this view. Ooh, the light fixtures, you know, whatever realtors talk about. And then she talks about how, you know, you have to buy me a house. And so this starts this whole conversation that lasts throughout the whole episode. Here is the gist of all of this. She's saying, I know plenty of husbands who buy houses and cars for their wives. I expect you to buy me a house because my father bought a house for me and my mom and my siblings. That's what my daddy did. That's what I'm expecting my husband to do. This is what she's telling him. In his mind, we just got married, aka we just met, right? I still got student loans I got to pay off, and just my education, I got to pay that off. And I still have other stuff I want to do before I get a house. But she said, you know, if we get deeper into this marriage, I'm not trying to grow up. I'm not trying to spend a whole marriage in an apartment or in a rented house, so that's just throwing money away. And he's like, I'm not opposed to getting a house with my wife. But the way she keeps phrasing it is, you are the one buying us a house. And he was like, you're not going to be part of it? She's like, I mean, my name be on the deed. Girl, really? And obviously they got under his collar because in his mind, she's setting unrealistic expectations. And she's setting it, not even just expectations, she's saying all this stuff as a fact, like it's non-negotiable. And I don't know if it is or not, but those are really big life decisions that need to be made together. But also, she said, and she said this last week, I think, she wants him to take charge. She wants him to take charge. She wants him to be the man of the family, man of the household, head of the household, all that stuff. So then as a man, instead of going back and forth with this woman, just tell her, look, no, we're not doing that. If we get a house together, we're going to go in on that house together as husband and wife. You're not just going to have your name on a deed just to look cute that you got a house. No. We'll do that together because we're married, and that's what married people do. That's the kind of marriage we're going to have. And let it be that. She says she wants you to take charge. And if you know in your heart of hearts, okay, this ain't the best way to do it, then put your foot down and say it. She gets all turned on when you're all rough and like, yes, and we're going to do this and we ain't going to do that. So just do that. It easily could have been solved, but it lasted the whole episode unnecessarily. She's like, I'm just joking, Shaquille. What are you talking about? And so the reason why the episode is called I'm Not Acting Crazy With You is because at the end of the episode, they're having dinner together and he's talking to her again about this. And he's like, yeah, that really bothers me because your expectations seem too high. She's like, I mean, I know other husbands that do that. And he was like, okay, so you want to marry one of them? I said, Shaquille, I'm not doing it. I can tell you acting crazy. I'm not acting crazy with you. And he was like, okay, so you don't want to talk about it? She was like, no. He's like, okay, but I do. It's like, oh. Now, one thing I will say, I love that he does not let her off the hook. I love that he calls her on her stuff and he makes sure he gets his point across to her and he's not going to let her just brush stuff under the rug. I appreciate that. However, again, this conversation did not have to last the entirety of the episode. Nothing has to be decided right now. She can have her expectations all day long. Y'all still just on week 5. Y'all still got 3 more weeks to figure out if you even want to stay together. So whether you agree with her or not, or want to beat a dead horse or whatever, you don't have to make any decisions right now because all that stuff is moot. Your lease isn't up for 3 months. You already know you're not getting a house in 3 months. So just let it be that. And again, you got 3 weeks to decide if you still want to stay with this chick. So I wouldn't even wasted my breath. I'd have been like, you know what? I understand your opinion. Here's my opinion. We don't have to make a decision right now. Let's table this discussion until we get deeper into the marriage. Okay. I think she would have been like, okay, she wouldn't necessarily got her way, but she's not getting her way either. Like, no decision has been made. So I feel like that's the best scenario for both parties involved. And it should have just ended right there. It didn't. And it was like, okay, this is whack. And that's pretty much all that happens this past week. I don't know where any of these couples stand. I think Nicole and Crystal have a really good chance if Nicole gets out of her way. Jasmine and Eris, something really big needs to happen. Like, he is opening up more, which is good. I think she's going to start opening up a little more too, but they still need that physical stuff. Even if he just still decides we're not going to have sex, okay, we still need something to happen. We still need to see some kissing. We still need some hand holding. We need something, some kind of physical activity that's going to bring you guys closer together. And if you guys saw the preview for next week, you saw that Dr. Pia is coming back. Dr. Pia was there either I don't think it was last season or the season before last. She made her debut on the show, and she's an intimacy coach, expert, whatever. I guess she's supposed to be kind of replacing Dr. Viviana, but she's not there full time, which really bothers me. I also feel like Dr. Pia should have come in a little sooner than now, because by the time she sees them, they only have 2 weeks left to really shake things up. I think Dr. Pia should have come in a little sooner. And I'll say what I've been saying for a minute. They need to find a permanent replacement for Dr. Viviana. That means at the beginning of this season, when Dr. Pepper and Pastor Cal are sitting down looking at all these pictures, doing all these interviews, doing these home visits and matching the couples, you need to have that third expert there, whether it's Dr. Pia, whether it's Devon, whatever his name is, Franklin. One of those people needs to be in that room with them as the permanent third expert who is helping you guys with these matches, helping you guys with these interviews, and just helping throughout the entirety of the season. And I don't know why that hasn't taken place. I don't know if they're just Pastor Cal and Dr. Pepper, that's all we need. No, it's not. You need a third person. You really, really do. The dynamics, you need that third person to really help balance things out. So Dr. Pia is coming next week to talk to all the couples specifically about physical intimacy. So we'll see what happens there. We'll see if there'll be any change with Gina and Clint. What do you guys think? What do you guys think about this past week's episode? What are your predictions for next week's episode? We have Dr. Pia coming to talk to all the couples about physical intimacy, right? We heard Shaquille say in some future episode that he and Kirsten consummates their marriage. I don't know if he's joking or if it's true. I'm assuming it's true. We don't know. But do you think that there's any hope that Gina and Clint are going to get to that space of physical intimacy? Even if it's just starting with a kiss every morning or a kiss every night, holding your hands, being hugged up on the couch. Do you think there's hope for them in that department? And again, what do you guys think of this week's episode? Do you think that Shaquille was taking things too far? Was he being oversensitive? I do think that he's entitled to feel what he feels, and I do feel like Kirsten sometimes dismisses his feelings, which I don't appreciate at all. But yeah, like this video, share this video, make sure you comment below so we can discuss these couples and discuss the future of Married at First Sight, and make sure you subscribe to my channel. Link the bell down one of the sides, right or left. That way you're always notified whenever new videos come out. And I hope to see you guys next week. And yeah, have a great day, guys. Peace.